Kakpo, Jinu kusi pohupo, mais de la malotan, et ouezon et sobon midi, nous donnons un bon, Tovi wenon blotodo, Aline le mi vekbon, Tovi jeno debi oui, Simbo dagwe dagwele, Tovi jeno babi oui, Monto vekwen la, Tovi jeno hobby oui. Betoni no menanyo, eje no le mombonodo. Ason na bonu beto, eje no le bobi wi. Beto vi adigbedoto, begle gbenyon wi wezo. Et ouezon et sobon midi, ouais didjoko, ouais dida, beto jeno bobi wi, nyande akoba jekona, kame jewe nyalona yi, me we kanyi me wale gato, e khaye we jobe goro, nyala wa imotoga, e keje we tombo wado, de manywe we nyalonyi, me ve menu we nyakoba. Beto vi adigbedoto, begle gbenyon wi wezo.
Bala bilanga kosa bese naligiono kisanga ye baboti bayo bayeba bayeba olingi gaye banguna bayo kasoni basakinga pona yo totika bango basala bakosala nyonso se pamba yanga na yo suka na nzambe lokola wanga na mipesi iwa mama ngai na kosamba yeba baboti bayo bayeba bayeba olingi gaye banguna bayo kasoni basakinga pona yo totika bango basala bakosala nyonso se pamba yanga na yo suka na nzambe lokola wanga na mipesi liwa mama ngai na kosala
The problem is not treating trachoma. Even if you treat trachoma, because the community has a highest prevalence, then there is a high probability to get reinfection after being treated.
And well, we're hot off the heels of World Water Day last week, and with it, the WHO launch of a new global strategy on WASH to combat NTDs 2021 to 2030. And we welcome you to this webinar in which we aim to identify and examine the opportunities available at this time, who we need to bring along with us, but also to ensure that throughout the panel discussions today, we keep focus or develop an even clearer sense of what investments are needed and where, if there are gaps in programs, what they are and what policies need to be in place to guide our work into the future. So thank you for joining us. I'm Patricia Amira, your moderator, overall moderator for this webinar. We only have 1 hour together, so allow me to quickly run through the things you need to know. Simultaneous interpretation in French and Spanish is available. To activate this service, click on interpretation on the pop-up bar at the bottom of your Zoom page, which is not showing up on mine, but hopefully it's showing up on yours. There will be a little time allocated for Q&A after each panel. Kindly submit your questions by using the Zoom Q&A function. If you are on social media, please join the conversation on there as well, using the hashtags WASH, Beat NTDs, and of course, tagging at WHO. And of course, there's also WASH for Health as well, one of the hashtags there. If the world doesn't know the importance of WASH, let's ensure they do so today. Okay, for our opening remarks, allow me to welcome the Director in the Department of Control of Neglected Tropical Diseases at WHO, Dr. Mwele Malichela.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. Today, we're going to explore the 2021 to 2030 Global Strategy on Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene to Combat Neglected Tropical Diseases. As a shorthand, I'll be referring to water, sanitation, and hygiene as WASH, and neglected tropical diseases as NTDs. For those not fully familiar with NTDs, they are a set of 20 diseases that cause tremendous amounts of suffering and death amongst the world's poorest people, and that have historically received far too little attention. These include conditions like dengue, lymphatic filariasis, guinea worm disease, trachoma, and intestinal worms. In January, after almost 2 years of preparation and consultation with member states and their partners, WHO launched the 2021 to 2030 NTD roadmap. It will be the chief policy document for control, elimination, and eradication of NTDs over the next decade. It was endorsed by the 73rd World Health Assembly in November last year, so now it has the highest possible level of global political support. Compared to previous work on NTDs, the roadmap calls for 3 fundamental shifts. First, a shift from measuring process to measuring impact. This means that we all have to focus on what our work actually does for the people in need. I'll return to the second shift in a minute, since it's the root of what prompts this webinar. The third shift is a move from partner-driven to country-driven programming. This is to ensure that the interventions reflect needs on the ground as opposed to policy decisions made from a distance. The roadmap's second shift, which I'm now returning to, is from disease-specific planning and programming to collaborative work across NTDs, and perhaps even more importantly, across the health and adjacent sectors. This includes WASH, community development, One Health, and education. And it should allow us all to amplify our impact. As a concrete manifestation of the second shift, the roadmap explicitly asks WHO member states to deliver on 100% access to at least basic WASH in areas endemic for NTDs by 2030. That's the background. I'm now at today's core topic. Last week on World Water Day, WHO launched the 2021 to 2030 Global Strategy on WASH and NTDs. This strategy is a companion document to the 2021-2030 NTD roadmap. The 2 documents are fully aligned. If you have worked in WASH and NTDs for a while, you may know that the 2021-2030 strategy is an update of the previous 2015 to 2020 strategy on WASH and NTDs. The strategic objectives to increase awareness of the mutual benefits of WASH and NTDs working together, to share data, to generate progressively better evidence on what works, and to jointly plan, deliver, and evaluate programs, these remain the same. But the update is critical because of the new commitment on the NTD side to help deliver 100% access to at least basic WASH. Very practically, joint work on the ground should include efforts aimed at behavior change, environmental improvement relating to WASH, social inclusion, and treatment and care of NTDs, including, for example, provision of safe water for medical and surgical procedures at healthcare facilities. As you know, these things will help achieve SDG 6 while helping fight NTDs. In the NTD department, we see the WASH and NTD strategy as critical to the world's ambition on NTDs. If you're joining me here wearing a WASH hat, my message is simple and heartfelt. Please work with me and my NTD colleagues. NTD programs can't do what we need to do for people affected by NTDs without you. And NTD programs can help you achieve your objectives too. There'll be more on how we can best work together in today's session. And thank you again for being here to participate.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mwele, keeping the SDG 6 as front of mind in working together between the NTDs and WASH. Thank you again as well for the overarching picture of the NTD roadmap again, and being reminded of that was launched earlier this year. And of course, the companion document on World Water Day. Now, going on, the truth that moments of reflection can reveal great insights. Our first panel will expound on some of their experiences with the help of panel moderator Gilbert Bayenda from the Ministry of Health in Uganda, who will in turn introduce the panelists. Always lovely to see your smiling face, Gilbert. Over to you.
Great to see you, Patricia. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be here with you today. And in the first panel, we will be reflecting on 5 years of WASH and NTD success and the challenges that we have encountered. We have got 3 panelists who have got a wealth of experience ranging from work done in West Africa, in East Africa, and the Western Pacific. So over the last 5 years, we have seen a lot of progress on WASH and NTD's collaboration. Now, very many multi-sectoral partners recognize that WASH is fundamental in ending NTDs, and they work closely with governments to ensure that this is happening. The recent COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the health inequalities globally, and also has added urgency for the need to integrate WASH and health. As we all know, those who are most vulnerable, especially to NTDs, are those who lack access to adequate WASH services. We now have a new roadmap with WASH targets, which is very essential and has given traction to those engaged in WASH and NTDs, some of whom you will listen to in a few minutes. We have a global strategy that puts this workshop into practice, and we still can't take this progress for granted. Work needs to be done, and we are glad to be talking to some of the people that are doing this work. I will now speak to this panel. First of all is Farah Ndiaye, Deputy Executive Director for Speak Up Africa, who has a wealth of experience in raising awareness on WASH and NTDs, and she has managed lots of initiatives in this regard. I would like to just start off by asking Farah, how has the West African region scaled up this joint WASH and NTD advocacy in the last year?
Thank you so much, Gilbert, for that question. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are in the world. So just quickly maybe on that question, I think it would be important to start off by saying that it is clear that improvement of WASH infrastructure and appropriate health-seeking behavior are necessary to achieve sustained NTD control and elimination. However, if the global strategies to fight NTDs do include provisions of WASH, very few national programs actually have specific WASH targets and approaches. So we have therefore focused our advocacy on a set of 3 key strategic enablers. And because advocacy does not happen in a vacuum, and it needs to be grounded in the programmatic realities that countries are evolving in, one of the first strategic enabler is the adequate policy framework. So on the policy front, we're seeing progress towards integration with obviously on the NTD side, we have the new NTD roadmap that the WHO launched earlier this year, which provides us with clear direction in our efforts to effectively control these diseases across the continent. And that document is actually central to the advocacy that we're carrying out at Speak Up Africa, as it calls for the intensification of cross-cutting approaches by integrating interventions for several NTDs and mainstreaming them into the national health systems, coordinated with the relevant programs, including WASH. On the sanitation side, we are partnering with AMCA, which is the African Ministers' Council on Water, for the development of the very first African sanitation policy guidelines. So the SPGs are actually designed to provide the foundation for countries to review or even develop comprehensive and inclusive sanitation policies that are tailored to their needs and that also address the need for integration. These two regional documents provide solid basis for the work that we're conducting at the country level, as they set the tone as to where the continent really wants to go. The second strategic enabler that I would like to share with you is the work around collaborative platforms. So we strongly believe that it is only through collaborative action that we can drive a sustainable change and achieve our objectives by 2030. And that's why we've created CAPOOP, which stands for Communication, Advocacy, and Policy Opportunities and Outreach for POOP. And our premise here is that together we can achieve more. The collaborative platform allows us to have access and share knowledge with water and sanitation experts across the continent to better understand what the challenges and the opportunities are. And we can, through this platform, we can mutualize also our resources beyond what would have been possible if we were to do it on our own. Similarly, again, on the NTD side, we launched the No to NTD campaign, which is an inclusive advocacy campaign which aims to increase awareness, prioritization, and national commitment to accelerate the control and elimination of NTDs in Africa specifically. So a key achievement of that movement was the creation of the No to NTD civil society network. And civil society is definitely a critical partner in our theory of change. So through our partnerships with these civil society organizations, we aim to improve governance at both national and regional level, build accountability in NTD-related issues, and in affected countries. We do believe that advocacy at the government level can also help increase ownership of the combined approaches to WASH and NTD control, and also underscore the need for national strategic plans. Which brings me to my third strategic enabler, which is capacity building, because the CSOs that we're working on WASH are often the same as those that are working on NTDs as well. This is the spirit that we've actually built both of the platforms on, and we do believe that the purpose of that improved capacity building for civil society organizations, but also government officials, media outlets, and other actors, is really to address the knowledge gap among the different stakeholders and create effective information exchange mechanisms between WASH and NTD sectors in order to further enable more information and further enable more informed collaboration. Sorry, I meant to say. And because in many cases, we do see that both sectors utilize the similar messaging and shared communication objectives. And we do think that it's important that our collaboration ensures harmonized messages between the two sectors, and that will further reduce conflicting messages, contribute also to amplify maybe communication for long-term behavior change. So I'd like to stop there, Gilbert, because I do think that these are the three main strategic enablers that I'd like to share with the group today. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you. Building partnerships, collaboration, improving advocacy. Great work in that line. And we would like to know what have been effective in regional and national influencing for WASH and NTD in your experience.
Yes, so I think I've touched upon a little bit some of those points, but really having our advocacy grounded into policy documents that were already adopted at the continental level was actually very much instrumental in our outreach to the national level as well. So how do we ensure that we can have an advocacy approach that covers actually all of the ends of the spectrum and use the commitment of the countries at the continental level to further ensure that there is actual implementation of those commitments at the national level. So having these strong policy guidance at the continental level was definitely something that was key in our approach to the national stakeholders, ensuring as well that we had the right platforms to engage with all of the actors. That also obviously implies that you know who the actors are, and that we provide them with the platforms to actually sit at the same table and be able together to identify the different challenges that they may face, and also find potential solutions that actually speak to also the priorities of both sectors as well. And again, the last point would also be around the diversification of the partnership as well. So make sure that we don't that we invite and ensure that other type of partners that may not be considered as traditional also participate in the discussion and also help find the solutions.
Thank you, Farah. I would like us to now welcome our second panelist, Martha Naigaga, who is a Senior Environmental Health Officer and Sanitation Coordinator at the Ministry of Health, at the Ministry of Water and Environment in Uganda. She's been instrumental in developing the Uganda wash and NTD metrics for decision making. Uganda was the first country to use this metric. Welcome, Martha, and I'll go right in. And for your first question, over the past few months, there has been a lot, rather a significant amount of collaboration between water and NTD in Uganda. What do you think has driven this new momentum?
Thank you so much, Gilbert. Thank you everyone who is participating in this webinar. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. I would like to really share about our collaboration in Uganda, and I'm happy that you have given me the opportunity to do so. I will highlight that this collaboration has been around for some time, although it has become very vibrant in the recent past. I would like to point out that for anything to thrive, for anything to work out in terms of implementation of programs or even realizing results, it must be anchored in the larger framework within which we operate. For example, if this collaboration we are talking about is going to be able to make meaning, it has to be anchored in the national framework and also the international framework within which we operate. I relatively saw like the keynote speaker from the WHO had said that the international agenda has already described that we must collaborate. She pointed out the NTP roadmap to the WHO for the next decade, and also rightly so the SDG agenda, SDG and also SDG 6 that call for universal health coverage, and also universal access to wash services, leaving no one behind. All these point to the fact that we must continue to work together as different sectors if we are going to realize any impact or going to give our people or our communities that are really suffering, if we are going to give them a meaningful service, that the collaboration must continue to work and work meaningfully. Having said that, I want to point out the key driver that has enabled this collaboration to happen in the recent past. Because as the Ministry of Health, all partners that are in the fight against NTDs have implemented the safe strategy for so long, and emphasis was mainly on surgery and antibiotics, and the F&E was largely the neglected part of the NTDs. So having realized that they needed to move into that part to actualize the results and cement them better, the results that are achieved through the other strategies, we needed to bring on board the F&E and make it work. And this in Uganda has been achieved largely because of the collaboration. Our mandates are not in the same place. For example, the mandate to deliver wash services does not lie with the Ministry of Health. So the issue of collaboration was very, very critical if we are going to achieve, any meaningful interventions towards the elimination and control of NTDs. Having said that, I want to point out the aspect that, we can continue to wish to wish that collaboration happens, but until we get out of our comfort zones and commit resources to make sure that the collaboration happens, that remains just on paper, and we can never move to do real actions until we commit resources, until we commit time, until we commit human capacity to this endeavor. So in Uganda, an organization called Attain has made this possible, that they provided resources to enable the baby steps to happen, that they have been able to facilitate meetings, to facilitate coming together, to facilitate joint planning, and all the other achievements we've been able to get in Uganda as a result of our facility, of our collaboration. And I must say that in the recent months, we've been able to achieve quite a number of things, and the journey is still long ahead of us. But key to note is that we have been able to develop our framework for WASH and NTDs, and we have also been able to identify, using our decision matrix, the hotspots where the lack or the limited access to WASH is overlapping with prevalence of NTDs. And together we are going to be able to plan interventions jointly that are high impact and also highly feasible for us to be able to prioritize what interventions we want to do as we move towards controlling and eliminating NTDs.
Thank you so much, Maha. Very comprehensive assessment and discussion on the NTD and WASH matrix and the steps taken by Uganda in East Africa. Our final panelist is Aya Yajima, who is Technical Officer, WHO Western Pacific region. I would like to ask, how is the WHO Western Pacific region supporting targeted WASH efforts to NTD endemic areas?
I'd like to share an example from Laos, where NTD and WASH program jointly launched an initiative called Shares WASH in 2016 to engage communities to understand the linkage between the transmission of schistosomiasis and also WASH and drive them to improve their sanitation. The most important step was to make NTD focal points and WASH focal points in the country become the best friends, and making two programs working together to become their habits at all levels, from central level up to district level. This is essential for sustainability of NTD and WASH collaboration. To achieve this, first, we, the NTD and WASH focal point in the regional office, together with our counterparts in the country office, facilitated the dialogue and also organized the joint field visit multiple times until each program understand each other's work and also understand the common goal. Both sides also need to fully understand that NTD-WASH collaboration is for the mutual benefits. It's clear for NTD program, but opposite is usually not the case. So the NTD program needs to be proactive to let WASH program understand the collaboration with NTD program is actually can help enhance visibility of their work, but also they are accountable and responsible for controlling NTD in their country. And secondly, you also need to make NTD WASH collaboration into a sustainable system. Through consultation with partners working in WASH in Laos, they decided to use the ongoing water safety planning, or so-called WSP approach, as a platform to integrate NTD. WSP is already a community participatory approach to improve WASH in the rural communities. So they already had a national goal and also a pool of WSP facilitators in the country who go out to each community and facilitate their understanding on the importance and the way to improve WASH in the communities. And they all agree that including NTD component into this approach will enhance communities' understanding on the need and importance of improving WASH in their communities. To ensure duplicability of this approach in every community, we also supported development of the new facilitators manual incorporating NTD and facilitated joint field implementation. We pay particular attention to ensure that facilitators do not educate villagers, but facilitate dialogue among them. And this was actually difficult because top-down approach is so common culturally on this countries. So we have to make this also as their habits through a series of field implementation. And now, after 4 years, both programs continue to expand Shares WASH. And last year, WASH program was even able to mobilize their domestic resources to sustain expansion of Shares WASH into more new cysto-endemic communities. And progress is also being made in Cambodia and also other countries like in Pacific. But the main challenge in duplicating this similar approach is, in my view, a lack of catalytic fund, initial investment to engage WASH program and create this sustainable system have to come from NTD programs. But NTD program usually don't have such resources. And there are many WASH partners and donors in the countries, but they also have usually their own donors' interest and priorities. So it's very difficult to influence. So I think we need to mobilize catalytic fund and invest in countries to help national NTD programs engage WASH programs and to enhance resource mobilization at the regional level. We are also planning to compile and evaluate various experience in WASH and NTD collaboration from countries in the region and develop a sort of investment case this year.
Pacific. I would now like to thank all our panelists, a big round of applause for them, and hand over to our great chief moderator, Patricia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gilbert, Farah, Martha, and Aya, for providing us with some pivotal, actionable points to learn from. But first, let's take a question or two from the audience. We have one here. On the new strategy, please can you say more on the type of community participation that is expected? And this question can go to either Farah or Martha, because at least they're actually with us at the moment. So if you could say it in, some succinct way, very clearly, because we've only got like a couple of minutes left before we have to wrap this session. So on the new strategy, please can you say more on the type of community participation that is expected?
Yes, I hope you can hear me. I think it would be great to hear from the national programs, actually. So I think it's a perfect question for Martha. Happy to go right after her.
Martha?
Thank you so much for the question. For issues to do with WASH, community participation is very key because the community are the biggest consumers. They are the consumers, but they are also the polluters. So it is important for them to be involved, and they must participate in identifying and appreciating their challenge and their contribution to the propagation of NTDs and how they can work around WASH to be able to contribute to the control of NTDs. So because the community will be the one implementing the strategies, we must involve them from the start up to the end throughout the process as well. I'll take an example of for example, a sanitation program. If we are going to implement a sanitation program, it will involve implementation of the hardware, which is provision of sanitation facilities for that matter, but also the behavior that is going to go into the utilization, operation and maintenance, and other issues of making sure that the facility is used in a sustainable way. So community involvement becomes very critical in this regard, that we cannot do without them, lest we risk just putting up white elephants in the community, and such facilities will never be utilized and the problem of NTDs will persist. Thank you.
Yeah, that's true. Farah, would you like to take up from there?
Yes, thank you, Patricia. Maybe just like to add, in addition to, I think the issue of community participation really also speaks to the need of the diversified partnership that I was alluding to earlier. I think another important engagement for communities is also around the issue of accountability. So ensuring that the commitments that are made at the regional and also at the national level are actually followed through. Communities need to be aware of what the governments actually just agree to do, commit to do, and follow the process. And for that, as Martha has clearly said it earlier, they need to be involved from the very beginning, from the very start of the project when we're actually even designing all of these interventions. So really, we need to stop seeing communities as just end receivers and full participants of the process.
Yes, that is certainly the route to change. Thank you all once again. And time to turn our attention to how we can achieve the shared vision for WASH and NTDs. And for this discussion, our second group of experts will expound on ways for better multi-level coordination, as we've been hearing, and so on, ever so crucial. Joy Rodo from the END Fund will moderate this session. A warm welcome, Joy.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Good afternoon, or in fact, good day to all our attendees from around the globe, given the time zones. So thank you for that intro, Patricia. Our next panel will navigate the topic of achieving the shared vision for WASH and NTDs, exploring why a new WASH and NTD strategy is needed. The WHO NTD roadmap for 2030 that was launched earlier in the year charts a really ambitious path to NTD elimination over the next decade. Water, sanitation, and hygiene have been too often underplayed as part of NTD prevention and control, but they remain essential for the control and elimination of these and other diseases, as we have learned with COVID-19 this year. With the amount of investments that have been channeled into administration of NTD treatment across the world, it really is a travesty that at least 2 billion people still rely on water supplies that are simply unsafe. And it's because of this that after progressive treatment, many are reinfected because they still go back to the same water source that infected them to begin with. The inclusion of WASH in the 2030 roadmap encourages a shift in approach from vertical disease programs to cross-cutting approaches, which are based on the needs of patients and of communities. With the recently launched global strategy on WASH to combat NTDs, this complements the roadmap and aligns with the Sustainable Development Goal targets on drinking water and sanitation. So in short, I think we have a stronger understanding and an example of what works in joint WASH and NTD delivery. Ownership of a shared agenda, effective multi-sectoral collaboration and coordination, as well as platforms and data for joint working. New tools such as the WASH and NTDs toolkit have been able to improve metrics, for example. And there's also been significant national shifts, such as the number of countries that are developing WASH and NTD frameworks. All this will help to make the dream of breaking the transmission cycle a reality in our lifetime. So the panelists that are joining us today will speak to the relevance and importance of this new strategy to different communities across the NTD ecosystem and beyond. With that, I'd like to start off by introducing the first panelist in this session, Monirul Alam, who's a WASH specialist for UNICEF in Bangladesh. He has extensive experience with the use of hand hygiene for all as a platform to accelerate progress for WASH and NTDs. So Monirul, turning to you, can you share with us if and how the new hand hygiene for all country roadmap can support STH and LF efforts in Bangladesh? And also please tell us if there are lessons that other countries can learn as they start to roll out their new roadmaps and more are developed.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Particularly the NTD roadmap, a complement with the hand hygiene roadmap, which with Bangladesh we have developed through a consultative process and engaging very high level ministerial people, mother ministry, we have local government division, and we did because we succeeded because we did engage the mandatory ministry, and also we succeeded to have a multi-stakeholder hand hygiene campaign along with private sector to include in this roadmap. And as we need it, it was successful is not only combating COVID-19, because in COVID perspective, we developed this roadmap, but now we can also, it helps to other hygiene-borne diseases like NTDs, including fight against soil transmitted helminthes and lymphocytic filariasis, which is very critical in Bangladesh perspective. So, and you know that germs doesn't follow any border or income strata. So good hygiene facility help us prevention of wide range of water-related diseases, including NTDs, and availability to water.
Have we lost sound there?
I think we've lost him for now. So perhaps you could move on to the next panelist to share their thoughts, and then hopefully he can get back again. He can join us.
Thank you for that. I wasn't sure because it's just started raining, so I wasn't sure if it was my end. Thank you for that, Patricia. So while we wait, perhaps we'll get Monirul back, but we can move over to Dr. Sultani, who is in Kenya, and Dr. Sultani Machende Chero is the head of the Division of Vector-Borne and Neglected Tropical Diseases in the Ministry of Health in Kenya. He's been actively engaged in a new community of practice for NTD program managers, driving WASH and NTD collaboration nationally and regionally. Dr. Sultani, turning over to you, can you tell us what impact communities of practice for WASH and NTDs have had on national and regional collaboration?
Joy, thank you very much. It's nice to see you again after a while. And this is a very interesting topic because when we talk about our main goal, which is to eliminate NTDs, it is impossible for us to have this discussion without bringing in the central role of WASH interventions. Now, for a long time, we have thought that WASH interventions are very expensive, and we have kept on going around in circles as to how we can be able to make it happen. Luckily, the NTD roadmap gives us all the solutions. It actually shows us that with the right kind of innovation, then it is possible for us to be able to achieve proper WASH interventions and eventually to be able to eliminate the NTDs. Now, the community of practice becomes one of the approaches that we can be able to use in our innovations to be able to achieve this objective. And maybe just to put it in context, the community of practice is based on the knowledge that each and every program manager has their own bits and pieces of information and expertise in how to implement certain interventions. Now, if you put all these people together, these massive human resource, then you will be able to get everything you need and more. And so what we have been trying to do with my colleagues is to come up with a community of practice that brings us together and makes it possible for us to talk to each other, to collaborate so that we can be able to pick from each other the bits and pieces we have and learn from each other so that we can be able to better implement the interventions that we set out to implement. Now, one of the things that this community of practice achieves is that it actually sets out a platform for communication. So we are able to reach each other, whether it is by phone. It is very easy because we are now able to have each other's contacts, whether it is by email, whether it is on social media, we can be able to communicate on WhatsApp. So it is very easy to be able to reach out to each other one-on-one. And even if you have a problem, you can throw it out onto a platform where all other program managers are. And one will quickly be able to tell you, yeah, I have experienced this problem, and this is how I went about solving it. This is how I went about it. So that is the general principle that we have been able to come up with. The other thing is that when we discover, because in our day-to-day work, we discover new approaches that actually give us better results. So when that happens, we can broadcast it to our colleagues so that they can learn from it, so that we can be able to improve on what is already there, real time. So the community of practice actually provides a one-stop shop where information can be shared. Another thing is that with the help of partners, especially the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and with the development team that is domesticated at the University of Washington State University and the UGHE in Rwanda, we are able to now come up with a mechanism to share resources. Like, for example, we can break down the components in the strategy, the NTD roadmap, so that it is in an easier form for the program managers to be able to take it in. And we can also link to other sites where these resources are available, which on our own as program managers, we would not be able to do. And then lastly, as we move forward, as the community of practice continues maturing, we are now able to provide training to members, especially now after some of these challenges like COVID-19, when they lift, members will be able to undergo training, short trainings. We will be able to have meetings where we can build capacity and make us better capable to implement the WASH interventions. Now, with that, it becomes very clear that the goal for elimination of the WASH-based NTDs is actually in sight, and it is something that we can very easily achieve if we can be able to leverage this community of practice effectively. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sultani. And I must say, I really admire your dedication towards this and your passion when you speak about it. I imagine your dreams are filled with parasites because of your commitment to this cause. I'd like to now move on to Anastasia Sampson, who is a medical officer for the Vector Control Services Department and Neglected Infectious Disease Unit in the Ministry of Health in Guyana. Anastasia, can you share Guyana's example where WASH is a core element of the national strategy for management of lymphatic filariasis?
I'm here to share with you a little on the importance of WASH, that is water, sanitation, and hygiene for lymphedema self-care. The Morbidity Management and Disability Prevention Strategy of the Global Program for the Elimination of Lymphatic Filariasis aims at reducing suffering and improving quality of life of those persons affected. This can be accomplished through improved hygiene and skin care of the affected limb. Patients with chronic signs of lymphatic filariasis are at risk for opportunistic infections as their immunological response is weakened. Good skin hygiene of the affected limb with particular attention to skin lesion is vital to decreasing the risk of opportunistic infections and acute attacks. The self-care activities for our patients with chronic manifestations are guided by CARES at the Neglected Infectious Disease Clinic, at the heart of which are water, sanitation, and hygiene services. The CARES services stands for C, clean, A, apply, R, raise, E, exercise, S, shoes. Clean or wash the affected limb twice daily with clean room temperature water and soap. Patients are also advised to wash between folds, whether they be shallow or deep, and the interdigital spaces. After washing, patients should thoroughly dry the affected limb, interdigital spaces, and folds, whether they be deep or shallow, with a clean cotton material towel or gauze. Secondly, we want to apply antiseptic, antifungal, or antibiotic creams to small abrasions or wounds that are present on the limb between folds or interdigital spaces. Also, patients are advised to keep their skin moisturized and hydrated at all times. We also encourage and advise patients to elevate the affected limb whenever they are at risk. Regular simple exercises also advised on a daily basis, as this also aids in the circulation and also helps the patient to some extent feel better. Shoes. Patients are advised to also wear shoes that are comfortable, that can fit or accommodate the size of the lymphedema that they have, as this aids in helping them to avoid entry lesions to the affected limb. Patients are also encouraged to keep their surroundings clean by cleaning same with bleach and water, as this aids in getting rid of pathogens that can cause opportunistic infections that can provoke acute attacks. These good sanitation and hygiene practices are practiced by patients that follow CARES. These patients show a lower rate of acute attacks as compared to those patients that neglect to follow same. In conclusion, we can say that great effort is continuously consented to keep a sanitized area at the neglected infectious disease clinic with good hygiene and to provide access to clean running water and soap to implement CARES. This allows adequate access to lymphedema self-care to each patient, guaranteed to decrease the incidence of acute attacks significantly, thereby reducing suffering and improving quality of life of those persons affected.
Thank you very much for that. I think we'll be moving on to our last panelist, and I'm just starting on my video. Thank you very much. We'll be moving on now to Fatima Barry, who's a health specialist for health, nutrition, and population global practice at the World Bank. It's great to have representation from the private sector because Fatima will share with us today a donor perspective with regards to targeting WASH investments in NTD endemic areas. So Fatima, can you elaborate on how the World Bank is integrating scale-up of WASH and NTD investments?
Thank you for having me here today. It is wonderful to hear about the progress over the past few years and the vision to support the new roadmap for NTDs. The bank, as a multi-sectoral institution, is glad to see more emphasis on cross-sectoral approaches to reduce the burden of NTDs. We know that NTDs have serious implications on human capital, and they are known to not only increase the risk of undernutrition, it delays child growth and cognitive development, and chronic infections can lead to fatigue. We also know that long-term economic productivity can be impacted without proper access to treatments and investments in infrastructure, such as essential WASH services. The bank has been very active since the 1970s in reducing the burden of NTDs and has committed over $160 million to date on a combination of national and regional programs that address NTDs and malaria. NTDs is a key threat to building a country's human capital and for progressing towards universal health coverage. Since 2015, with the support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, our efforts as it relates to NTDs have been concentrated in supporting our client countries in three main areas. First is to increase sustainable domestic financing for deworming. Secondly, it's to integrate deworming in universal health coverage packages to strengthen primary health care. And third, and more importantly for our discussion today, is the support we're providing for multi-sectoral responses with a particular focus on the WASH and education sectors. The bank recognizes that investments have to go beyond health facilities to make a real dent in the burden of disease. We must integrate sectors, such as the WASH sector, to work hand in hand to address environmental cleanliness and sustainability. In the past few years, as it relates to WASH and NTDs, the bank has focused on two areas. The first is on a learning agenda to increase the knowledge and understanding of WASH interventions and the pivotal role that they play in the prevention, control, and elimination of NTDs. This includes spotlighting NTDs in WASH poverty diagnostics that are done at the country level, such as the one conducted in Angola that will be published in the coming months. The bank has also conducted several studies to determine whether bank-financed WASH investments reach NTD endemic areas using GIS and other spatial analysis tools. Secondly, the bank continues to provide operational support to increase WASH investments in NTD endemic areas. Through a team that I co-lead, we continue to provide technical and financial support to country task teams and our client countries to strengthen NTD programs and to integrate multi-sectoral approaches. This, in some instances, includes technical assistance to identify the specific activities that can be included in bank finance investment projects that could then be scaled. The bank will continue to support countries in this endeavor to scale up investments for WASH in NTD endemic areas And we look forward to continuing to work with our partners on this very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Fatima. Patricia, it's unfortunate we lost Monirul earlier, but I think I will hand back over to you for the Q&A. Perhaps if he's back on, he can engage then.
All right, thank you so much, Joy. And thank you to each one of the panelists. A question that's come here that I think is pertinent for this discussion from Yaya Kamisoko, who says, is it possible to put NTD's budget and the WASH budgets together? Who would like to tackle that question? Have I lost everybody? No.
Shall I
Hello,
respond, Patricia?
Yes, go ahead, Mohammed.
No. Hello. Yeah. I think it is important because these are very kind of go hand to hand, because NTD and was very close, and hand hygiene is a critical aspect. Hand hygiene for all roadmap, and we can do together because there is similarity for intervention, particularly when we go for intervention perspective. So yes, it's possible to design similar kind of approach.
Sultani, you switched your camera on, so I'm thinking that you have something to add to this.
Yeah, actually, Patricia, what you're talking about is extremely important because it goes into that element of innovation around being able to deploy the WASH interventions for NTD control. Now, the thing is that for this WASH to be implemented, we cannot really think about it separately, as a separate budget coming into the NTD program. And I think the roadmap lays it out very clearly. So what we do is we put out budgets to now collaborate with the WASH sector. That's the trick. We come up with robust collaboration mechanisms between the NTD sector and the WASH sector, so that the WASH sector pays more attention to implementation within NTD endemic areas. Now, once we are able to do that, we are good to go. Otherwise, if we start looking at WASH interventions as a separate budget-heavy intervention, then we cannot even afford it. So it is about making sure that we have good collaboration, we have technical working group, joint technical advisory groups, where we can be able to help the WASH sector to focus on NTD areas and implement WASH interventions. I think that one now brings out that focus around budgeting very clearly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One question, it's got to be very quickly answered, but because we just haven't had enough time and not enough questions to squeeze in. So how will WHO and the national leaders and communities include people affected by NTDs and organizations for disabled people in the planning and design of inclusive WASH for health? Bit of a mouthful, that question, but was that clear to the panelists? And who would like to offer some ideas towards that? It's a big one, isn't it?
Patricia, we are a bit confused because you are putting out the question and then we wonder if we should just, all of us, we should answer it at the same time.
Go ahead. Just raise your hand. Say, yes, I'm happy to take that on.
Yeah, so probably Mohammed, you would like to do
that? Yes, I think this is very critical. WHO can play a lead role because NTD is because entry point is.
We're losing you, Mohammed.
Here, because you go for hello.
Your sound isn't very good at the moment, Mohammed. So we're losing.
Yeah.
We're losing you.
Yeah, Sultan can just. Yeah. Sorry, Sultan can.
Okay. So thank you. I think Patricia, this is squarely within the. There's something we always say that we don't want to leave anyone behind. Leave no one behind. So in our planning for NTD programs, we must ensure that we have planned for how we will reach these disadvantaged groups, the ones who live. You know, I usually say that entities begin at the end of the road. You know, when the road ends, that is where the entities begin. So in our plan, we must know when the road ends, how are we going to go in so that we get to all those people who require these interventions. And some of the most interesting issues are that when now you find these unreachable groups, the disabled, you know, all those you have mentioned, and those who live in those very remote areas, that is where the heaviest burden of entities are. Forget about this area which is near the road. That is where the heaviest burden is. So in our planning, we must absolutely ensure that we pay a lot of attention to these groups, these disadvantaged groups that you're talking about. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, now we really do need to bring this segment to a close now. So thank you all for your participation and for the questions. I know some of them will be answered online because there were quite a few that were there. I'd now like to invite Dr. Maria Neira, the Director in the Department of Environment, Climate Change and Health at WHO, to share some final thoughts on what she's heard this afternoon.
Thank you so much. And it has been really a pleasure to listen to all the interventions, the commitments, the good examples of collaboration, and of course, to hear from so many people about how much they are engaged and convinced that this is the way to go. Honestly, it's so difficult to imagine that today neglected tropical diseases still exist. Yeah. As it's very difficult to think that WASH is somehow a neglected disease as well, because in 2021, we can still not say that there is an universal access to safe water and sanitation and hygiene. So both are somehow neglected, but with a very strong community behind. So I'm convinced that if we join the forces and the examples we have been hearing, if we convince others, if we optimize the resources, if we strategize among our networks of influence and collaboration, I'm sure that we can do incredible, impactful actions here and hopefully even miracles. Many of those diseases that we call neglected tropical diseases still exist, and still exist even if we know that they can be prevented, they can be treated, they can be properly managed, and most of that management and treatment and prevention will come from an improved action to safe water, sanitation, and hygiene. And yet we know that millions around the world, they still don't have access to sanitation. This is really painful. And I think that the pandemic, the fact that we are confronting an infectious agent now, is again reminding us how important it will be to have access to the basic sanitation, public health measures like washing your hands. And for that, you need to have access to safe water and sanitation. So we don't want to see those 2 billion people that still rely on water that is not safe. We have almost 700 people practicing open defecation because they don't have access to proper sanitation services, or the 3 billion people with no access to hand washing facilities. This is absolutely unacceptable. So we need to put these two communities. And you heard from the very eloquent speakers today that since we launched the strategy 5 years ago, this collaboration resulted in very, very nice results at the country level, at the regional level. The two communities are not only talking to each other now, the NTDs and the WASH, but they are creating this association, and these strong networks are only growing now. We need to accelerate that growth, and we need to do it on a very exponential way, because we heard very inspirational examples, and we heard as well the incredible health benefits that we will have if we improve access to safe water and sanitation, and how it will be not only benefits for NTDs, for the neglected tropical diseases, for many other issues, and of course, including equity and many other programs that benefit, including now the prevention of this pandemic. So the roadmap recognized the importance of WASH. I think we all recognize it. And now we have even very important cross-cutting targets like the reaching the universal access to at least, and we need to be even modest here, basic water supply, sanitation, and hygiene in endemic areas. I will not call it at least, I will call it the minimum we can do for our population. And this is the SDG 6, target 6.1 and 6.2. And if we build on the success we have until now, I think we can renew our call of action, making it even more powerful and joining even more forces as we have been doing now, build on the success. And it was very, very rewarding to hear so many around. But again, as I say, increase enormously our level of ambition, the speed at which we are obtaining those successes, and creating more and more stronger networks and collaboration between the two communities. I think this is irreversible. And I'm very confident that one day we will be able to say, what do you mean by NTD? I don't know what that means. I forgot what NTD means, because there are not anymore neglected tropical diseases. That will be a dream for today. Thank you very much. It was really very, very rewarding to hear you all. And thanks for inviting me. Over, Patricia.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nader. And yes, you're so right. How can entities and WASH be neglected in this day and age? So yes, not rhetoric anymore. Let's work towards the very real reality of what are NTDs at the end of the day, okay? Let's all work towards this goal and ultimately aim to achieve the 2030 roadmap targets. Great discussions as always with the WHO and WASH and the NTD group, with having such a pivotal position in healthcare overall. Thank you to all the speakers and of course the audience as well as the webinar team from behind the scenes. So thanks again. And from the webinar team, it's goodbye for now. Thank you.